Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back for Chapter 35 of Book 1, Meridian. Last time, Einar visited the Equilon Export Complex, where he made arrangements for cargo to transport to Cassida. Having finished his trade duties, he pinged Ayati to see where she was. She invited him to join her at the Shooting Star. They returned to the Howlin' Wolf with their new passenger, Mac, who Sejana immediately recognizes as Macklin Bouchard, former Decure of the Imperial Special Service, Viper Squad. The two hug, surprising Ayati and Einar, who may never have seen Sejana show physical affection before. Mac tells them about his experiences on Sembria during the Hierarchy attack and informs them that his principal, Minister Torvarius, is attempting to reach Cassida secretly. That is why Mac bought out the Wolf's passenger manifest. Einar agrees to help them, and Sejana negotiates a contract with Mac to protect the Minister. Ludin Sartan lurks in the passage, remaining hidden, listening to the plan. Ludin slips back down the hall to his quarters and seals the door. Crossing to his bunk, he reaches under it for his cargo bag. The bottom is made of reinforced material to help protect it in a cargo bay during transport. He presses a section, and the panel comes loose, sliding open. A small disc-shaped transmitter slides out onto the bed. He stares at it, hand frozen in the motion of activating his cue. His duty is clear. He should report this plan to whatever operatives are active on Equilon, so they can capture this Torvarius. But the only way that will happen is by taking the Howlin' Wolf. Luciale will resist. She and the crew have proven resourceful in escaping dangerous situations. They've already proven they're willing to risk a misjump rather than be captured by the hierarchy. If the ship is captured, he'll be forced to find another way to Cassida. But surely there are plenty of passenger transports from Equilon. It wouldn't be that difficult, and so far being aboard the Wolf has led him further from his mission. He tries not to think about Ayati's smiling face and what would become of her. Even the captain has been kind and welcoming. No, he is on a Lucent Blessed mission. He must not fail, and he must do his duty to the hierarchy. Activating the device, he watches as yellow lights blink on the display for a few seconds, changing one by one to blue. Opening his queue, he sinks to it and prepares to send a message. All right, I think it is time to make some rolls. First, we need to roll for this message. That'll be with Ludin's electronic comms skill. He's trained in electronics, but not comms, so he's got a basic +1 to this roll. Target number is 8. 7 total, that is a marginal failure. Oh, interesting. I'm going to say that this is a success, but he's going to have to contend with a more challenging complication. And I know exactly what that complication is. Sejana isn't what I would call a trusting person, so I think it is possible, probably even likely, that she has placed some sort of quick tag on transmissions coming and going from the Wolf, especially if she thinks that there's something off with Ludin. I was going to say that it was 50-50, that it would catch Ludin's transmission out, but with that marginal failure, I think that bumps it up to that likely result. So we'll roll our percentile dice, and if it is 75 or less, the answer will be a yes. Unfreaking believable. That is a 76. Ludin Sartan, you are one lucky bastard. So that leads me to another question. Did the ComNet just not pick up that transmission because the device encoded it well enough to disguise it as an emission release? Or does the device prevent the message from being sent, thereby warning Luden that there's surveillance on the ship's comms? Given this is a hierarchy spy technology, I think it's likely that the message is sent by disguising the transmission in some fashion. So we'll say that's the yes answer on another likely Oracle roll. 14. Okay, that makes sense. Let's go ahead and get back to envisioning this. As the comm device is charging, Luden composes this message. To any hierarchy operatives on Equilon, Minister Torvarius of Sembria is intending to make transit to Cassida aboard the trade ship Howlin' Wolf in the next few days. Plan is to rendezvous in a secluded spot on Equilon, allow the minister to board the trade ship, and proceed separately from there. The crew of the Howlin' Wolf are resourceful and likely to attempt escape if intercepted in flight. May recommend attempting capture at rendezvous if enough personnel are on planet, or facilitating the capture of the Wolf before transit to the rendezvous. By Lucent's grace, you will find aid in whatever path you choose to take. When the light indicators change, Luden sends the message and leans back against the bulkhead. It's out of his hands now. This is the exciting part about injecting dice randomness into the storytelling, because this is definitely not what I expected to happen. So let's figure out what the hierarchy is going to do, because I think there are a few paths forward here. There's no roll to make on whether or not they receive the message. We already know that hierarchy agents have been probing at the Sembrian minister's security. The question is, what path are they going to choose? To me, the most sensible path is to try and take the Wolf before it leaves for the rendezvous. That way they can have their agents aboard, and when Torvarius and his group board the ship, they can be neutralized and captured. So let's say that path is the likely one. 19, definitely a yes. I think the ranking officer is going to reach out to Luden to talk through the situation, and upon discovering there's normally a liar on board who will be away from the ship until the rendezvous, they agree it is going to be much easier to overpower 2 people than to potentially take on 2 liars, security personnel, and 2 ships. I think that's all the information we need right now, so let's go back to the narrative and see what happens. As they're standing in the exit hatch, Ayati gives Sejana a quick hug and says, "Well, I guess we'll see you in a few days. Try to stay out of trouble, but like my kind of staying out of trouble." Sejana nods. "I'll do my best, though if I wanted to stay out of trouble, I would have picked a different career. I could be a scholar at the academy." Ayati gives her a look of mock horror. "A scholar? You?" That elicits one of Sejana's knife-like grins. "You'd be surprised." "Yes, I would. Anyway, just make sure you stay safe." Sejana opens her mouth to respond, but Ayati interrupts. Yeah, I know. If you wanted to stay safe, you would have picked a different career." Sejana shrugs. "I'll see you in a few days." Mac tosses her and Einar a casual salute, and the 2 liars step through the hatch into the starport. The hatch seals behind them, and Ayati looks over at Einar. He says, "We should get some sleep and focus on the business at hand. Unloading and loading cargo." Ayati nods. "Just seems like we keep getting drawn into other people's problems. Don't get me wrong, I want to help, but we're just a merchant ship, and it just seems like we've run afoul of the hierarchy a couple times. What are the odds?" "Going to get worse and worse, I think," Einar replies. "Luciel was right. Cassida and Plith are hurtling toward a confrontation. It's going to happen. The question is when and how bad will it be. People like us have to decide if we're going to get involved and do things we can do, or just try to stay out of the way." "I guess Sejana has tried to keep us out of it," Ayati says with half a smile. "We're the ones with the bleeding hearts who keep wanting to help." "Maybe, but we're in it now. And Luciel could jet out of here anytime she wants. I'm sure she could find passage on any ship heading to Cassida. I think she wants to help more than she lets on. Too true, Cap. Alright, I'm gonna bunk in for the night. See you in the morning. Einar nods. Get some rest. The next 2 days pass quickly, as they oversee the unloading of the Crasian cargo and loading of the Equilonian cargo. Einar makes sure that Luden gets experience during the process, but the younger man seems distracted. Einar mentions it to Ayati, who has noticed it as well. At the end of the day, Luden packs in his gear and starts heading into town, and Ayati hurries to catch up. Hey, Luden, she calls out, and he slows his pace, turning to look at her. Wait up a minute. Yes, he asks. You heading into town? I am, he replies. I thought I might explore a little bit before we head out tomorrow. Would you like some company? Luden shakes his head and says, Actually, I was hoping to have some time to myself. Oh, well, sure, Ayati replies, shoving her hands into her overall pockets. Hey, is everything all right? You seem kind of distracted. His eyebrows rise and he says, Everything's fine. I think I'm just still getting used to being away from home. So I've been avoiding going out and exploring a new place. But I decided today that was the wrong way to think about all this. Time to not be afraid of the wider universe. Let's make a quick deception roll versus Ayati. Since Ayati's essentially setting the difficulty for the task, I'm going to roll intellect for Ayati. She's got a +1 modifier, so here we go. 6. Yeah, that makes sense. I think of anyone on the ship, Ayati trusts Luden, so she's not really on the lookout for deception. Luden's deception skill is a +2, and he's only got to beat a 6. 9 is an easy success. Ayati nods. Of course, that makes total sense. You got to find your place in this new world. Well, have fun out there. Just make sure you're back by mid-morning local time. That's when we're lifting off. He nods and starts walking toward the rail station. Ayati watches him go, then starts walking back to the ship, whistling a jaunty tune. Luden wanders the streets of Castile for the better part of an hour, making sure no one is following him. Satisfied he's unobserved, he makes his way to the coordinates provided. It's a small tea shop off one of the major thoroughfares, and as he approaches it, the sign says that it's closed. Stepping up to the message pad next to the door, he enters a code sequence and hits send. Within seconds, the door slides open, and he looks both directions before entering the shop. The darkness inside is almost impenetrable. Only the light from the open door filters through, quickly snuffed out when it slides shut. Luden waits, listening carefully, but other than a faint whine of a fan moving air through the shop, it's silent as a mausoleum. When Lucent crests the broken plains, a voice pierces the darkness. The fire burns away impurity. Luden closes his eyes and replies, giving the countersign. Light blooms, and Luden slowly opens his eyes, blinking away the brightness. The tea shop is small and cozy, with a counter along the back wall behind which are shelves with transparent containers full of tea leaves and small teacups. A handful of small tables populate the space between the door and the counter. A door behind the counter opens, and a slight woman dressed in blue and gray flowing robes steps out and studies him, silent for a moment. Then she nods and gestures to a table. While Luden sits, she opens a container and scoops tea leaves into 2 mesh bags, dropping them into the cups and pouring hot water over them. She carries the cups to the table and sets one in front of Luden before taking her own seat. Luden watches the water darken for a moment before looking up at the woman across the table. She's studying him with a blank expression, and he takes a moment to hold her gaze before he speaks. "Thank you for inviting me," he says, "and for the tea. It smells like home." "We can speak freely," she replies, gesturing toward a small dampener attached to the table. "I am Zabella Doran, Hieromonk of the 2nd Ordo." "Tashin Vorl, Hieromonk of the 4th Ordo," Luden replies, offering a brief sign of obeisance, touching both hands to his forehead as though covering his eyes. Zabella waves the gesture away. Your information was most welcome, and I agree with your assessment. We will take the ship before the rendezvous, allow the target to board, and capture them before the ship leaves Equilon. Luden nods. We'll have to deal with the liars and other security personnel when they board the Wolf, but I believe they may lower their guard once they're aboard the ship. Zabella shakes her head. I doubt their guard will be lowered until they're in Cassida once again. But that's all right, we won't give them a choice. Pursing his lips, he picks up the teacup and smells it. He mustn't show his embarrassment at the correction. We are scheduled to leave tomorrow morning, so we'll have to move on the crew tonight, he says. Einar and Ayati won't be expecting anything, so we should be able to take them in their sleep. Zabella watches him for a moment, then gestures, calling up a quick display with biodata on the ship's captain and pilot. Let's go over the plan. There must be no mistakes, lest warning be sent to our quarry. Zabella's team is going to accompany Luden back to the ship tonight. I think we should make a couple of rolls on the Oracle to see whether Einar and Ayati are awake when Luden returns, and whether they have any chance at all of detecting this attack. Let's start with the captain. I think he's unlikely to still be awake. I think he's definitely the sort to look at the situation, realize he's done everything he can, and try to get rest before the action starts. So let's roll our percentile dice. 25 or less will mean that he is awake when Luden returns. 62, that's a no, he's out cold. Ayati, on the other hand, has been a hotshot pilot in the past, and while she probably understands the importance of getting a good night's sleep to be on her best as a pilot, I also think she's more likely to be keyed up. She's got a habit of grabbing midnight snacks and sitting in the cockpit, so I think it's much more likely that she'll be awake. Let's call this 75 or less. All right, 63. Let's envision it. Ayati's sitting in the cockpit, cycling through another set of jump calculations. If their impending passenger is as hotly pursued as Max seems to think, she wants to be prepared for as many possibilities as she's able. They have several possible routes out system, and some will make an emergency jump easier than others. Despite the lateness of the hour, Ayati is determined to have all the calculations set before they lift off in the morning. For that reason, she sees an indicator of the hatch cycling open around 0300 local time. She assumed that Luden had returned hours ago, but never actually checked. Chuckling, she thumbs on the comm and says, "Well, you're getting back late. I hope you didn't have too much fun in Castile." There's a pause, then Luden says, "Ayati, I didn't think you'd still be awake." "Just doing some calculations," she replies. "You don't sound drunk, so I suppose I should commend you for that. How was the city?" "It was fun. Is the captain awake as well?" Let's give Ayati a roll. And I think it's going to be carouse in this case. That might seem like an unusual choice, but I think because she and Luden have had, as far as she knows, a cordial relationship, and I think because she expects him to have been out carousing until this time, it makes a certain amount of sense to me. She's got a +1 to this, and I'm going to set the target number at 8, but I am going to give Ayati a Bane die because it's late. She's tired and probably just a little bit distracted. So we'll roll 3d6 and take the 2 lowest dice. Holy Darkstar. That is 3 6s, so that Bane die does nothing, and that's a 13 total. There's something in his voice, or in the question, that makes Ayati pause her calculations and look up. She taps on the display, activating the internal monitoring system. As the displays fill with images from the Wolf's different compartments, she says, "The captain, I'm not sure. He might be in engineering." It's going to be a deception roll at -2. Set as a target number of 8. 4 is a fail. As the bank of camera displays activate, Ayati sees a squad of figures in dark armor explode into action, racing through the corridors toward the bridge and engineering. Terror seizes her as she watches Luden leading the handful headed towards the bridge. Almost immediately, she can hear the boot falls on the deck coming towards her. Swiping a hand over the console, she closes and seals the bridge while swiping away the comm channel and opening a new one to Einar's quarters. "Cap, we been boarded. Luden's leading them. They're coming." She doesn't wait for any sort of acknowledgement as she opens an external comm channel to Sejana's queue. It fails to connect as Ayati realizes there's some sort of jamming field preventing the external comms from working. Now they're at the hatch. She hears Luden say, "Ayati, open the door and I promise you won't be harmed." Ayati swipes over a different comm panel and connects with the Harrower. With any luck, the jammer won't cover the fighter's military-grade comm system. Let's do an electronics check. Normally, I might call this a comms check, but in this case, Ayati is actually trying to use her computer to connect to the fighter's computer system to send a message. So let's roll plus computers, which is +2 for Ayati. She's going to need a 10 to do this quickly enough. 7 plus 2 is a 9. That is just barely a failure, and I know exactly what that means. Ayati connects with the Harrower's system and taps in a quick message to Sejana. Wolf boarded by armed figures, Luden with them. She hits transmit and watches the message fall into the buffer. The jamming tech is preventing the message from sending at this range, but once Sejana's queue is within range, it should automatically send. She hears something beeping on the other side of the hatch, so she swipes away the connection to the Harrower and punches in a code she never thought she'd need. As the code authorizes and the system purge begins, the door slides open. Ayati raises her hands and turns slowly. Luden stands in the doorway, a stunner pointed right at her chest. Behind him, a severe-looking woman in dark armor watches. Ayati says, "Luden, why?" There's a flicker in his eyes, but then they harden, and he pulls the trigger. Ayati convulses as the stunner bolt slams into her, and darkness follows. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or support me on Patreon at patreon.com/errantadventures. You can also buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on all the socials is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the deep, liars.